Geeks and Ghouls. I'm kind of sad today because I just read that Peter Straub, well-known and beloved horror author, has passed away. And he's one of the authors I wish I have read more of his books. If you have been watching my book hauls or the book hauls that are currently being edited and soon to come out, I've been getting some of his books lately because I really want to read him. I want to read everything that he has done because I have a soft spot in my heart for him. And actually, I'm reading The Talisman, the book he wrote with Stephen King, right now. And I decided to make this video about why you should read Peter Straub. And here I've got Ghost Story, which is his most well-known book. I wouldn't say it's his best or my favorite. I'd probably say that the best Peter Straub book I've read is Koko, which is book one in a quintology of sorts. I have a very soft spot for his last book, A Dark Matter, which is also very controversial, and everybody who read it hated it. And I told a lot of people read it and they hate me for that. But let's just talk about who Peter Straub is. Peter Francis Straub was born in March 2, 1943. Car accident. He was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. At age 7, he was hit by a car, so he had to be hospitalized for several months. And that's something that marked his early age. And you often see authors of dark fiction, they have a traumatic early age. And I guess this is the case. He wrote a couple literary novels early in his career, but he had very limited success. However, this literary interest kept on in his horror writing. He wrote some horror novels like Julia in 1975 and If You Could See Me Now in 1977, but was his next novel, Ghost Story, here, that made him a household name. And believe me, this book came out in 1979 and it felt like a more literary version of Stephen King. It had all the hallmarks of Stephen King, like the New England town, the very character-driven novel with a lot of dialogue. Definitely a bit, he had that flashy writing of Stephen King, but Peter Straub was always a more literary author. He had great prose, and he was actually writing more in-depth, more meta. In a way, imagine that you read a Stephen King novel as written by Clive Barker. That's how you get it. It has more of a artistic sensibility. He was not a prolific author, of course. He was more interested in the literary aspect, the meta. But his next big book was Koko in 1988, which is a non-supernatural book. It's about a group of Vietnam veterans who are being murdered by somebody, and those veterans have a dark secret from the Vietnam War. And this book is definitely a book I want to reread. It's a very fascinating read, and it starts a series of books that are I'm not quite sure how they're tied together, because I have not read the next two books, Mystery and The Throat. They're somewhere behind me, I guess, but I can't find them right now. And that creates the Blue Rose trilogy, and then he returns to some of the characters from Koko in his later two novels, Lost Boy, Lost Girl, and In the Dark Room, that were published in 2003-2004. I've read those two. Very interesting books. They play a lot with the concept of what literature is. The main character is an author and he's trying to investigate the disappearance of his nephew, I believe. Lost Boy, Lost Girl is an amazing book. You should definitely read it too. His last book was published in 2010. It was called The Dark Matter. It's sort of a Rashomon-like story with a group of narrators narrating a fateful day where a cult did something out of the ordinary and the tragedy that followed. It's very interesting to me. It was a very fascinating novel. However, a lot of people did not like it. But I thought that this book was the ultimate, it was the answers of Peter Straub in a way. So there was too much of Peter Straub in it. So people will either love it or hate it, I guess. Let's talk about the writing of Peter Straub. As I've said again, it's the type of author you get to when you read Stephen King and you think, I would like this book to be more challenging. I would like this book to be more literary, more heavy, the language to be more ornate, I guess, and he's your man. He has a great writing style. He is definitely working on his prose. It's like he's choosing every word. It's sort of, there is this, if you've read any of the Lovecraft stories, you know how the language is very ornate and very baroque and heavy, and Peter Straub does get this style of writing. He's not as oral as Stephen King, because Stephen King has this tendency of writing a story like a tall tale, a campfire story, and Peter Straub is writing the book version of it. He's definitely interested in literary fiction, as I've said again, and this is what makes him stand out from most horror authors, because he's doing, let's say, thinking man horror or thinking woman. It's like all those 90s abyss books like Katekoja, but written in a more approachable and more mainstream style, I guess. He has some interesting themes. I mean, Ghost Story is definitely not a book about ghosts. If you go in the ghost story believing that you read a story about ghosts, you've got another thing coming. But basically, it's Peter Straub is elevating the horror novel. He was elevating the horror novels in the 70s. He was striving to do something far more than your weird tale, your spooky story. He wanted to do art, I guess. That's another thing that he had in common with Lovecraft. And this is something that definitely stands out in his books. I've read some of his short stories too, and they can get freaky and weird in a good way. His novels are also ambitious. They're not there to give you chills, even though you'll get some chills here and there. It's horror after all, and it's good horror, but they will unsettle your mind too. He's rooted into reality of sorts. I mean, Koko is a story about about Vietnam, about PTSD, about returning from the war, and how this marks you. But also, it's a great thriller about a serial killer after a group of friends, and how their lives are affected, and how they have to cope with it. Ghost Story is also about a group of friends that have a dark secret, and it comes back to haunt them. You can see a pattern here. Lost Boy, Lost Girl is about a lost boy, and the protagonist, a mystery author, trying to understand what's happening. In the Dark Room also follows this. A Dark Matter is about a group of friends. You can see some of the tropes coming back again and again, that also have a dark secret, a traumatic experience about an event that happened, and they have to cope with it in the present. Yes, he has a lot of boxed narrations, meaning that he's using people to narrate what happened, and sometimes what they perceive as reality is presented to us, and then we go into a different point of view and we see the events from that point of view too. And that's interesting because that creates unreliability, which of course always works to build tension. But I think that he is the thinking man's horror author, at least of the 70s and 80s. And yeah, I was talking about the Talisman. I had a short about it that it's like Stephen King and Peter Straub, who are both authors that are very wordy, are just adding all of their extra words into it. And I feel this way. I've actually set the book aside for a while and I'll read it in parts, I guess. So don't expect a review soon. And that's a reason why I have not read more Peter Straub books. He's a bit wordy. I've warned you. He's as wordy as Stephen King, but in a different way. So yeah, if you have not read any of his books, you can start with Ghost Story or Koko. They're both great novels, and I highly recommend them. And may he rest in peace, I guess. And thank you for all those books. Stay spooky, folks.